So welcome everyone. Welcome to VWMOOC 24 and week 4 and our session, our final session of the day. And we are in Chilbo in Second Life with our presenter, Dr. David W. Deeds. And you can see his avatar right there. David, anything you'd like to say about yourself before I introduce you? Anything that maybe...
Well, I have an introduction in the presentation itself.
Okay, all right. So we can get started. Thank you.
Yes.
So thank you everyone for joining us in Second Life and in Zoom. And if you're watching this, the recording on YouTube, then welcome to you too. All right, David, so you can take it away.
Okay, well, hello and welcome to my presentation, Avatars Don't Steal Souls, 20 Years Using Virtual Worlds in Education. So I last presented on using virtual worlds in education in 2019. It was for a BETMEA, that's British Education, Technology and Training, Middle East and Africa. Now you know why they use the abbreviation BETMEA. In Abu Dhabi back in 2019. I presented on virtual worlds in Asia, Europe, Africa, the Americas, all over. Of course, you know what happened after 2019. COVID hit and things kind of came to a screeching halt. But now I'm trying to get back into doing some of this. Weirdly enough, in 2021, Mark Zuckerberg introduced the metaverse. And of course, my fellow virtual world educators and I thought, wait a minute, introduced? It was mystifying and gratifying at the same time to have people come up to me and say, David, metaverse, isn't that like these virtual worlds you've been babbling about for years? And I said, well, yes, as a matter of fact, it is. So to me, it's great. I mean, whatever it takes to get this into the mainstream. There are a variety of reasons why it's never really become mainstream, and I'll get into some of those a little bit later. But the phases that I've seen over the years, at first we only had virtual worlds. There was no such thing as virtual reality. I know I'm going back a few years now, but remember, this is 20 years of using virtual worlds. Then virtual reality came in, but it was costly. Virtual worlds were more cost effective. And in fact, for a number of years, when I gave presentations, I would tell schools, look, virtual reality is cool. Don't worry if you can't afford it, though. Use virtual worlds instead. Now, virtual reality is becoming more affordable, but there's still a role for virtual worlds in the world, the real world. So, personal introduction. I've been teaching and training internationally for 22 years, 7 years in higher education, 15 in K-12 schools. I've had Second Life cyber campuses in Korea, China, Mexico, other countries, Open Simulator in Egypt, Ghana, Guatemala, and others. Currently, I'm considering striking out on my own. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this diplomatically after teaching for 22 years. So anyway, we'll just leave it at that. I'm currently thinking of striking out on my own. I backed into education. I was in the corporate world back when the tech bubble burst back in 2001. Remember, I told you, 20 years. And so it's kind of interesting now that I'm thinking of getting back into the corporate world. But anyway, a lot has changed since I first started my cyber campus in Second Life for Usong University in Daejeon, South Korea. And I'll get to that a little bit more in just a minute. I've been an IT manager, an IT director, technology integration specialist, technology teacher in a number of schools. And so I've used virtual worlds in just about all of them. There were 2 jobs where I was not actually in the classroom, but I still managed to use virtual worlds in different kinds of school activities. All right, so here we go, 20 years. You see the avatar dressed up as Superman, my avatar dressed up as Superman. That was my first cyber campus back in 2006. I'll talk about how that all got started in just a moment. I don't want to get involved in any tangents that may eat up too much time, but I want you to take a quick look at the Our Beloved Leader poster. This was in China. I had just taught my kids how to use Photoshop. And so they started superimposing my avatar's head on top of Chinese and Korean propaganda posters. Instead of our dear leader, which is what they called Kim Il-sung, I became our beloved leader. I always thought they were hilarious. Other people thought they were funny too. The assistant school director, who was an active member of the Communist Party, did not find it amusing at all, which of course just added to my glee. Here we are with the IB, International Baccalaureate logo. This was during an unsuccessful attempt to convince them that virtual worlds were valid. We finally settled on being able to use the IB logo because we were an IB school, but we were to emphasize that in no way was IB advocating virtual worlds. I'll talk about this a little bit more later too. Okay, so I made a switch to K-12 schools, and again, I'll explain a little bit more about that later. Mainly because of all the monkey business going on in Second Life. As soon as I took kids into Second Life and they discovered there was a search engine, they were visiting all kinds of places that I didn't want them to go, and their parents didn't want them to go. So I've been relying on Open Simulator in schools since like 2009. Occasionally I'll make a visit to Second Life, but it's been mainly Open Simulator since 2009. Minecraft was a big success, especially the mod Minecraft EDU. Some of you may remember that. It was just a mod, and they were essentially giving it away to schools. I think I was one of the first people to advocate it, and so I had pretty much a lifetime free license to use it. And even after the company went away, I still had the code, and so we would just use Minecraft EDU. Minecraft has changed since Microsoft took it over. I had to stop using it simply because I wasn't working at Minecraft or Microsoft schools. Anyway, had a lot of success with Minecraft. And I've experimented with things like World of Warcraft. We were using this for cross-curricular activities, using World of Warcraft for an English class, for example, where kids were keeping journals of their adventure in World of Warcraft. Spore was good for biology classes. If any of you have played the game, you start off with a single-celled organism and then you evolve up to bigger critters. And I've used a variety of games over the years as well. Okay, so how did it all get started? Well, it's all geek to me. I was a professor in a university's fledgling international business department. We had students from all over, China, Korea, Vietnam, Russia. They were all supposed to speak English. Now, here's the story. This is Korea. My distinguished colleagues only spoke Korean, or at least they could only teach in Korean. Well, of course, we wanted students from around the world. They didn't speak Korean, and so the idea is that there would be 3 or 4 round eyes, foreign professors, who would teach in English until kids could learn enough Korean to be able to understand a lecture in Korean, right? Yes, it's a crazy idea now. It was a crazy idea then. It didn't work, but anyway, the point is that these kids couldn't understand English. The Russian kids could, the Vietnamese kids could, but most of our students were from China, some Koreans as well. The very first day of class, we opened school. I'm standing in front of the classroom. I've got my slides. We've got our textbooks that we're handing out. I talk for about 5 minutes, and I realize that they can't understand a word coming out of my mouth. And I was just devastated. I was like, how am I going to teach these kids? We're supposed to be teaching them business too. I was the only professor in the school who had actually had business experience, including the business teachers. How was I going to teach these kids if they couldn't understand what I was saying? And so I cast out the lifeline to all my friends, to see my colleagues, to see what I could do. And so they suggested virtual worlds, of course. So I started a Second Life cyber campus. I soon had kids building, programming. They were running their own businesses. We had t-shirt businesses that they were selling in world, and of course they were using the designs in the real world to sell as well. So it was a big success. The students loved it. However, it was not a big success from the standpoint of the people I was working for, who considered it just to be a game. And again, the most repressive words in education then and today is the way we've always done it. It had never been done before, and people aren't really happy with that most of the time in education, I found, no matter where you are, international or national schools. All right, you don't mess with the VBE, the Visual Basic. I was professor in another school. This was a vo-tech school, supposedly preparing graduates for employment. This is a country where they have entire TV channels devoted to showing kids playing computer games. Every kid loved computer games. They wanted to program computer games. But Visual Basic was the pet subject of the tenured for life colleagues at the school. Let me give you an idea. You could go to one of these professors and give him a date. You could say April 21st, and he'd say page 422 of the textbook, and he'd be plus or minus 10 pages of where he'd be in the textbook on April 21st. Schools get into ruts. They have fixed mindsets. They have an idea of what is acceptable, what works and what doesn't, and it's very, very difficult to change. Virtual worlds, I found, have been very difficult, if not impossible, for folks to accept. One of the reasons why is that kids were having fun. If it's enjoyable, students can't possibly be learning, right? This is a little bit before the days when people were talking about games-based learning. But yeah, if it's enjoyable, they can't possibly be learning. It's just a game. That's what people would tell me. And now, the part of the presentation that explains the title, Avatars Don't Steal Souls. I hope you folks have a sense of humor, because you're going to need one, because I'm going to be poking fun at some virtual worlders a little bit later too. Anyway, I was a professor at the university, as I mentioned before. I was writing my PhD dissertation as a series of articles on how to teach business and computers to kids who can't speak English, as you might imagine. We were talking about things like sheltered instruction observation protocol, which is integrating language objectives into actual content for the lessons. It was a model. I don't even know if people use that anymore or even talk about it anymore. But people were seeing these articles of mine. And so I got invited to take a sabbatical and go and teach at my first K-12 school. Anyway, the principal had begged me to come, please come, introduce Edtech. But she kind of forgot to ask the owners and directors if that was a good idea. So I thought it would be great to introduce virtual worlds by creating an avatar and giving it the director's name. So I invited her into the computer lab, sat her down, turned on the virtual world, and said, "Look, it's you." She jumped up, knocked her chair over, genuflected, ran from the room crying and muttering. And I asked a coworker what she was saying, and the coworker told me she was praying that the avatar doesn't steal her soul. Now, again, you've got to have a sense of humor. I've told this story before to people, and they will tell me, "Oh, David, you're making fun of these people." And I said, "Well, yeah, I am." Yes, I'm making fun of them, but in a good way, in a good way. You don't understand what you don't understand, especially when it comes to admins, it seems. You need to be able to trust technology teachers that we always have student interests in mind. The only thing that really irritated me about this situation is that the assumption was that I was going to corrupt these children, these innocent children, with all of these terrible, terrible modern technological advances in education. It went downhill from this point. You probably know when you take kids into a virtual world, as soon as they realize that they can change clothes, what do? They take their clothes off. And so Well, of course, the same director happened to be walking by the computer lab one day when I was saying, hey, put some pants on over there, with all these naked avatars running around. It went downhill very, very quickly. Didn't last very long at this particular institution, but it was a very interesting introduction to K-12 schools on the international circuit. That old rack magic. Now, people think I'm making this up, but no, it's true. It's another extreme example, but it just shows how Edtech mistrust stems from ignorance. We had in this school, our internet connection was a phone line that came in through the library window. And so 9 times out of 10, if somebody came to me and said, David, the internet is out, well, it was because somebody had closed the window on the phone line. So as soon as I opened the window again, it was there. We had these old PCs, they had no network cards, they had no Wi-Fi, but the expat community in this place was very, very tight. And so I knew a parent who worked for Vodafone. First, we spent a weekend measuring everything in the school, hallways, doorways, to see how much it would cost to put in a regular wired network. It was much too expensive. People just, they were horrified at the cost. So then we got a dish and a router. The only thing, and we got it for free. Somehow the directors got the idea that it was all going to be for free, but we didn't have the ability to use Wi-Fi in the PCs. We needed the little Wi-Fi USB sticks. You've seen them before. I don't know if people still use them these days, but they were like 25 bucks each. So for 50 PCs times 25, again, it was just, what? How much money? You told me it was going to be for free. But it was more than that. They thought that I was practicing black magic. They would sit there and laugh at me. Oh yeah, this data is just going to magically float in the air from this PC to another PC. I mean, it's an extreme example, like I said, and I can laugh about it now, but it was not always funny at the time. Again, this is a very unusual case, at least I hope so, but it's kind of illustrative of the attitudes that some people have about EdTech in general. If they don't understand it, then it can't possibly be true. And again, it gets back to the idea that all of this technology is harming kids somehow, and that I would actually be doing something to harm kids. That's probably the part that irritated me the most. I do expect the Inquisition. I have a Monty Python reference there, if you're a fan. So after these experiences that I just talked about, things got a lot better. However, I was in an IB school, and we were, or candidate schools, meaning that we had to go through the certification process. And I could not convince the IB that virtual worlds are valid no matter what I did. I presented at a lot of conferences over the years, AACE, ISTE, etc. Never ever got a conference presentation approved for IB. They just do not buy it. But it didn't matter anyway, because we passed the certifications simply because I was using project-based, inquiry-based learning via the virtual world. So I kind of got a pass. So in hindsight, the good news is most of the stuff I do, I'd never get away with in an American public school. Remember, as much as I complain, I just kind of did things anyway, and it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? In American public school, I would have to go through all kinds of red tape just to get anything introduced like virtual worlds, and I just did it, didn't worry about it. Bad news, mainly just in my classroom. I've tried to get teachers over the years to use virtual worlds. I had some success with cross-curricular activities, like art classes. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But usually it's just a matter of people resisting change because they know they can get away with it. Admins need backbone to support the teachers with backbone. And the classic example of this, as you recall, folks were convinced for years that online learning would never work. Oh no, simply cannot work. until COVID hit and they were forced to do it. Then all of a sudden, oh yeah, online learning. Well, what happened is that people simply copied and pasted their lesson plans into Google Classroom. They didn't change how they were teaching anything. It was just really the same, except now you were looking at your teacher on Zoom instead of in the classroom. And then when it wasn't as successful as everyone thought it should be, they said, you see, we told you, that doesn't work. Now, here we go. And remember, you've got to maintain a sense of humor about this. Over the years, I have found that for some people, the higher the virtual world skills, the lower the real world skills. And remember, see, I've got, not you, of course. All right, here's the story. I love this story. I met a guy from Greece in Second Life. He was writing his dissertation for his PhD, English, not his first language, and so he was having a lot of trouble writing his papers. And so he asked me for one of mine. And just to show you how trusting I was, I'm like, sure, no problem. And I sent him a Word document. Well, he did a search and replace, Europe for Asia, Greece for Korea, and then he published it in what was then the flagship Virtual Worlds publication as his own. Now, what's hard to believe at first is that how anybody got fooled. I don't know if anyone actually read this article, because if you read it, you would realize that it just didn't make sense. Just putting Europe where Asia was and Greece for Korea, there was things that just didn't add up. But anyway, there it was. I had no idea any of this was going on. I was completely oblivious to what was happening. I was in China. We don't get a lot of news from the outside world. I published this paper in a Korean educational journal. I get a note from them and they say, hey, David, this is your article, or actually it's our article now because we have the copyright for it. We're going to sue. And so I contacted the publisher of the Virtual Worlds publication. I said, look, big misunderstanding here. This is actually my article. The Korean publishers are getting ready to file a lawsuit. Maybe you want to have a retraction and take the article down. And the guy refused. No way. There's no way that a guy in an international school, K-12 international school in China, could possibly have written an article like this. It had to be by the Greek guy, right? It's something that I've encountered over the years. The idea that I'm not, even when I was in a university, it was kind of the same thing. My first cyber campus was a 100 square meter plot on this region that was dominated by New York University. I was leasing from the New Media Consortium. It's not around anymore, but their discounts allowed me to maintain a presence in Second Life long after the educational discount was gone. You remember that, when Second Life eliminated the educational discount. Anyway, here we were, Usong University, Daejeon, South Korea, and the folks from New York University wouldn't talk to us. They preferred to ignore us completely. And every time we had something that animated on the campus, they would report us for violations of the region guidelines. Anyway, my students, I didn't mind so much, but it was my students who were just truly heartbroken. They were very confused why nobody would talk to us. And so over the years, it's been something, I don't know if it's still the same now, I've kind of lost touch with all this, but it was the idea that if you're not in the United States and not at a university and not doing research, then you weren't quite on the same level, you know what I mean? There were several times that I protested when I tried to contribute to different kinds of venues. It's like, look, you guys are doing research into virtual worlds. I'm doing it every day in the classroom. I might have something to contribute here. So anyway, the point of all this is all years ago. I've gotten over all of it. But we have been guilty as virtual worlders of maintaining an exclusive club. And I think it's one of the reasons why virtual worlds really didn't catch on as much as they could have, as they should have, is that we needed to be more inclusive. Okay, that concludes today's sermon. Again, all this was years ago. It's all funny to me now. Bursting the bubbles. Schools tend to create and maintain cultural or organizational bubbles around themselves. Those who don't fit in leave by choice or not. Usually for me, sometimes it was by choice. Sometimes it was not by choice. And the BS just becomes self-perpetuating. There's a lot of pop psychology masquerading as educational theory. There's a plethora of hacks making big bucks selling it to suckers. And if you work in a school, you're aware of this phenomenon. Some admins go off for some seminar or some conference somewhere, and they come back and they're like, they're born again. You know, they've been told something, and oh yes, it's true, it's true. But my favorite example was the focus on the learning. We had a bunch of admins go to a conference where they were told to focus on the learning. And they came back and they had like little skits that they would give during meeting. Well, David, we're not going to talk about the budget today. We're going to focus on the learning. And as I said to them at the time, I said, please, 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 don't stand up in front of a bunch of teachers and tell them that we're going to focus on the learning for a change. Like, that's not what they've been doing all this time. But anyway, there are chances you're working for and with people who have adopted the latest fad. And there are lots of different examples that I can give, but what we need in schools is change management. This goes back to the corporate world. In fact, I gave a presentation on this, all of this nonsense about different kinds of learning theories and learning styles and all the kind of stuff that most people know are not true anymore, but it's kind of got stuck in people's brains. What you need is a change management technique. You have to be able to define teachers by who they are versus what they do. And in the business world, this happens all the time. You start with a chart. Okay, here's where we are today. Here are the characteristics. Here's where we want to be. And in the middle, here's what we have to do in order to make that change. And teachers can change, especially if they have to. Again, I'll use COVID as an example. People were saying, no, there was no way online learning was going to work. Well, then suddenly they had to do it. And what do you know? It did. Maybe not that well. This school ain't big enough. Now, over the years, I've had a couple of schools where recognition isn't always a good thing. I've had people who are coworkers, and especially bosses, if they think they're experts on education in general, that's okay. I can humor them, okay? But sometimes they get the idea that they're gurus regarding Edtech. But remember, it's only certain Edtech. They've got the idea that this works, this doesn't work, this works, it doesn't work. In the case of admins, it's especially galling because they haven't been in the classroom for years, or maybe they never were in the classroom. Anyway, I was on a roll. This was while I was in Guatemala. I was selected for 3 conferences. And of course, you know, I'm proud of what I'm doing. I'm making announcements to the whole staff. Hey, I'm going to present at ISTE. I'm going to present at AACE. Thinking that maybe someone would be happy for me. But no, it really irritated some of these people, especially the ones who thought that virtual worlds were BS. The fact that all these people in the outside world disagreed really, really irritated them. Anyway, the main problem tends to be paralysis by analysis. Again, I had very little to lose in most situations. I mean, what was the most they could do? Fire me? So I would just introduce things. I didn't care. Before I start that, I want to get into the idea about what Edtech is good and what Edtech is bad. I wanted to get 3D printers while I was in Guatemala. 3D printers had suddenly become affordable and reliable. When I first bought my 3D printer, I was spending more time fixing it than actually printing anything. But suddenly things like MakerBots came out, brands like MakerBots came out. And so the principal of the school said, well, we've never needed a 3D printer before. Why do we need one now? I said, look, that's completely wrong attitude about all this. You've got to be able to innovate. You've got to be able to change. Okay, so anyway, paralysis by analysis. Oh, let's do a 3-year study of 3D printers and see if anyone actually benefits from it, and of course create a grid of the cost to benefit and ratio, blah, 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 blah. Same kind of thing that I had with virtual worlds as well. Oh, let's not do it today. Let's wait until we do an analysis. So I have found that inside or outside of the classroom, you have to be inserted into an EdTech leadership position. And what do I mean by that? Well, when I was a teacher, and I would try to innovate outside my classroom, it was as if I was above my station, you know what I mean, above my pay grade. If I had the title of technology integrator, then I could do it. My favorite, when I was an IT manager, I had the same kind of problem because I was supposed to be managing the networks, the software, the hardware. Wasn't really supposed to be dealing with classroom situations. The sweet spot was being the IT director, where I didn't have the usual IT manager responsibilities, and I could just pretty much just do whatever I wanted to. Now, sometimes there was a fight to get it in, but you've got to have the leadership position. In the military, we used to say, look, privates don't take orders from other privates. Privates take orders from sergeants. The privates know who the sergeants are because the captains have put the stripes on their sleeves. And so you've got to have the stripes on your sleeves if you're going to try to do anything with EdTech in any kind of school. You always need top-down support. Nothing is going to happen on a grassroots basis. This has always been the case, especially when you're trying to introduce revolutionary things like virtual worlds. Oh, by the way, these avatars or these cartoons, they're drawn by a guy who runs Studio Jonas. I have a slide at the end if you need any artwork for your change, but that's not true. Most older teachers have the confidence to try something new. They may be skeptical, they may be reluctant, but sooner or later you can convince them that maybe, just maybe, it's going to work. And it's been the case with virtual worlds, for example. The truth is, it's the youngest who are convinced they already know everything. If you want to know somebody who is going to be difficult to convince of anything regarding education, look for somebody who just finished their master's degree in education, right? And so everything has their M.D. after their name. Impossible to tell them anything because they already know everything. All right, so the successes that I have had, and again, I've had lots of successes inside my classroom. It's outside the classroom where things have gotten a little bit dodgy. But I have found that being sneaky works. I've introduced virtual worlds through a problem-solving goal or task-based work, like a workshop, where I would introduce project-based learning. Oh, what's an example of a project? Well, here's a virtual world. Let's go inside, and we're going to cooperate. We're going to collaborate. We're going to build this building of this city. Same kind of stuff that I had kids doing, but it really did open some eyes among educators, well, among fellow teachers, that suddenly, oh, yeah, problem solving, task, goal-based work, yeah, virtual worlds, okay, great. Cross-curricular, interdisciplinary units. In an IB school, there's always pressure to do things across different subjects, right? To combine biology, math, English, art. Most schools, as you know, teach everything on a silo subject basis. From 8 to 9, they're in English class. From 9 to 10, they're in math class. There's never any kind of crossover, and it's very difficult for these teachers to convince themselves or their students to do anything that combines the context for different subjects. Well, virtual worlds are perfect for this. I would have art projects where, as you know, in virtual worlds, you could have sculptures, We'd have sculpture contests. We'd have photography contests where I put their work up on exhibits. We had thousands of people visit one of our exhibits in Second Life for art contest that we have for some of our students. Standards. Everyone loves the word standards. And so if you can convince your administrators that virtual worlds are going to help with a skills matrix, for example, then you can have some success. For example, I've taught little kids over the years. I've taught everybody from pre-K to grade 12 to all the years of college, grad school, etc. It's always been funny. Grown men would be terrified of teaching little kids. It's like they've got some kind of disease that they're afraid to catch. But I don't care. I'll teach little kids. And so on several occasions, several schools, we had kids who, and even older kids as well, who had only used iPads. They had no idea how to use a keyboard, no idea how to use a mouse. And so I would use virtual worlds to introduce them to how to use a mouse, how to use a keyboard. And so now that's a little checkbox on the skills matrix, right? How would they have done it otherwise if they didn't have, if they were only going to use iPads? So that was a big success. Something else I've done in several schools is to start a technology week. And so this is one of the ways of getting everybody in the school involved with what we're doing, what Mr. Deeds is doing in his computer lab. Really big lately because of things like virtual reality or 3D printing or laser cutting and all the other nifty stuff. But even in the old days, I would start with technology week. Oh, robots as well. Let's not forget robots. Even in the old days, I would have a technology week, and kids would just come in, and it would be like, okay, here we go, virtual world. Kids love virtual worlds, all ages. It doesn't matter, all nationalities, they all love it. It's always the adults who are the problems when it comes to trying to convince people that this is valid. Start with Technology Week, introduce them, and I did have some success for some projects where people would, teachers would bring their kids in and we would do things like design classes. But these were like art teachers, for example. Although we did have one project for history or humanities where kids actually came in and they built their own city. It was their own utopia, and they had to come up with their own laws and regulations. They had like uniforms, and it was a really interesting project. For teachers, if you can't get them into your computer lab for Technology Week, I have found that we can make virtual worlds an elective for professional development. Anything to get a break from power school, right? Or lately it's been DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's like, my God, not another hour looking at PowerPoint slides on DEI. Make virtual worlds an elective for PD. Teachers will love you for it. So fighting for truth, justice. Here we have a couple of members of the David fan club. Here I am with considerably darker hair and more hair in general. Anyway. So it's been quite an adventure. These are just a few anecdotes. 18 years later, I had cyber camp, Open Simulator Cyber Campus at the previous school. As I mentioned, I have decided it's time to perhaps do something different outside the classroom. But I use it in computer science and new media classes. Again, kids always love it, always love it. We had people building, of course it has its own programming language. Of course, I'm preaching to the choir, considering my audience here. But one of the problems that I've had is the ability to have instant gratification for programming. You can't sit kids down and teach them Java object-oriented theory for 6 months and expect them not to die of boredom. You've got the ability in Open Simulator, which is what I was using, to be able to, well, we did it in Second Life a little bit too, Now suddenly they've got their doors opening and closing, their windows opening and closing. Instant gratification. They have an instant result. They code, they make a change, everything changes. New media classes, we were using it to actually create not only art, but to learn photography. So anyway, kids always love it. Teachers are still a little bit resistant. At the school that I just left, one of the things I did was to get them new laptops. We had laptops that simply weren't powerful enough to run a lot of the software that we wanted to use for design and for video. Now that they're getting the new laptops, this might entice some curiosity. And also, upon my frenzied recommendation, I really had to fight for this. They're about to get Class VR headsets too, so they'll have both VW and VR at the school. So I consider that my my final accomplishment in the classroom. So thank you very much. I left some time for questions in case anyone has any. Once again, need artwork, Studio Jonas. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Are there any questions here that I can pass on in Zoom or in?
No questions, no comments? Okay. Well, once again, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, I never thought about that. Well, no, I kind of think of them as, I always considered virtual worlds to be 2D, 3D, because you're staring at a computer screen, pretty much the same as a game. No, I would advocate for years people using virtual worlds if they couldn't afford virtual reality. You recall that until recently, virtual reality was something that most schools simply could not afford. It was like tens of thousands of dollars. Now you can get headsets for $500, and people are starting to get into it. But again, it's not something that makes me feel trapped in my headset. Yeah, oh, I know. Well, there are still disadvantages for virtual reality headsets, and one of the ones that I've seen is that you can only have so many. How many kids are you going to have to share one? As I mentioned, I talked the school that I just left into buying Class VR headsets, but they bought 8. All right, so now how are you going to use 8 in a classroom? You're going to have to use it for a couple of minutes, then pass it to somebody else. Virtual worlds are still something that the entire class can sit down, as long as you've got the computers, and use simultaneously and participate collaboratively so that they're all in the same space at the same time. That's still something that's a rarity for virtual reality. So virtual reality is really cool. I know it's going to be improving a lot, but there's still a role for virtual worlds in schools. And again, Open Simulator, its basic installation is free. You can set it up in a computer lab. You don't actually have to have, like a network connection, although it's more convenient if you have a host like Dreamland Metaverse. What's this? The experiences field is, yes, that's right. Another advantage of virtual worlds is that your kids come in, they build something, well, they don't finish it, well, they just log out and they come back and everything's still there and they can continue. You can have projects that last for months. I've had projects that lasted for a semester. a year even, in case of some of them, where they were building their cities. Not something that's really possible in virtual reality, at least not yet. Maybe sometime soon it will be. That's right. Well, and as was mentioned, one of the things that happens with virtual reality, I mean, I've had kids get sick, get dizzy, parents who the kid comes home and says, "Oh, I went into virtual reality today and I got ill," and they're banned from ever using it again. None of those things happen with virtual worlds. So that it's still got a ways to go, I think, for virtual reality. I was curious. Now, I kept my presentation to about 40, 45 minutes because I wanted to talk to you guys and see what kinds of things you've been doing with virtual world. Oh, will virtual worlds survive? I think so, yes. I kind of expected back in 2021 when Zuckerberg announced the metaverse that suddenly there would be this massive surge in interest in virtual worlds because people would see what was possible. But then again, it's you're still in virtual reality where you're kind of stuck with this headset necessary in order to be able to enjoy it. I kind of thought that that's when virtual worlds would really start to take off. Not necessarily Second Life, but Open Simulator, for example, would take off. It hasn't really happened yet. Still a lot of skepticism about all this. Not among you guys, I know. So that's why I was curious. What kind of things have you been doing with virtual worlds in schools? Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm sorry. K-12 schools or higher ed institutions. Yes, I know about the VWEC. I've visited the campus. I want to attend a meeting one of these days. Working with K-12 in Mind Test, Minecraft in the past. Mind Test. I've never heard of Mind Test. What's that? Mind Test. Again, I love years and years. As soon as Minecraft bought Microsoft, kind of all over as far as I was, because it's tied to the licenses reaching expired. You got to have the license. Minecraft now. Mind Test. All right, I'll have to check that out. See, this is the kind of thing I'm looking for. Browser-based. I know there was a lot of talk about a browser-based virtual world for a while, but they didn't work out as far as I know. Of course, I haven't kept up with it over the past couple of years. Hmm. No. Okay. Cyber Lounge. Okay. Yeah, this is what I'm looking for. Okay. I know there was, wasn't it Kitely that tried to come up? Did they ever? It's browser-based now? Oh, okay, okay, all right. I know there was a lot of experimentation with trying to get a virtual world to work in a browser for a while, and as far as I remember, it just didn't quite pan out. No, tell me more about that. Oh, okay, okay. Museum is tracking VW. Sure, sure. I'm trying to remember now. It seems like at some point, no, I'm going to embarrass myself because my memory is not good enough to recall the details. But there was something where we were combining an LMS, I believe, with Second Life. I'll have to. Yes, yes, yes. Sloodle. That's right. Yeah, I love playing with that too. Why didn't that ever catch on? Right. Uh, okay. All right. Well, I I would like to know more about them. I need to refresh my memory about a lot of this stuff. That's right. That's right. A little more time on my hands these days. I've got to check that out. Where is that again? The Virtual Worlds Museum? Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else? Anything that we're doing? Okay, okay. Now, how about the Second Life versus Open Simulator thing? Are people still using Second Life these days, or has anyone switched to Open Simulator? I think most of you guys work in. Okay, okay. And I'm just curious, is the split from university versus K-12 schools? That's what I found, is that it was difficult for me to take kids into Second Life, and much easier to get them into Open Simulator. A lot less mischief.
Oh, I was just talking about how we go to all the different OpenSim worlds, and the OpenSim community conference that they have every year in December. VWEC plays a role in that, but we always start right now in Kitely because we had to have one place for a landing point so that people who are new don't have to download all the different platforms. They can hypergrid jump from Kitely.
Yeah, I had a Kitely account for quite a while, and then once I used Dreamland Metaverse as my Open Simulator host, started relying more on using Dreamland Metaverse and kind of strayed away from Kitely. I'll have to check it out again. Wolf
And
Territory.
yeah, the owner of Wolf Territories is really supporting education and will even give educators some free space to explore and build. And so it's been great to have so many people come forward and network, because for 15 years, we kept trying to get education going in virtual worlds, but we were all isolated from each other and sort of reinventing the wheel, creating an orientation pathway, building, but not realizing what other educators have done. And now we're pooling our efforts all together, and it's really made a difference.
Wow, this sounds great. I know for years I mentioned the New Media Consortium, I think. After the educator discount was eliminated, they made it possible for me to maintain a cyber campus in Second Life for years because of the discounts that they offered. I couldn't afford it otherwise because the schools that I was working for refused to pay. So I've had like a couple of schools that have actually paid for my Second Life and Open Simulator cyber campuses. Usually it's me who has to pay, but anyway, once they were gone, I've been kind of homeless in Second Life. I need to find a spot. I think I still have like a home somewhere on some remote region, but I need to find another spot maybe and just open. I don't need a lot.
We can help you. We can help you with that because there are some places where you can even get like a free office over at the Nonprofit Commons if there's something for education that you're researching. But you also might be interested in our student challenge. We've done 3 of them where students come in and it's kind of like a hackathon. They build serious simulations for learning, and it's really brought a lot of educators together. So I'll get you the playlist so you can see what students have done.
Okay, yes, I'd love to see that. No, I deliberately kept the presentation brief just so I could have this little question and answer thing. I've learned a lot. I'm sitting here scribbling down notes as we talk. So thanks for all the information, and I appreciate you coming to the presentation today, folks. Very first one, I still remember. I remember doing that because I was in Antigua, Guatemala I was living at a Spanish school and I had a very, very dodgy internet connection, and I was, no atheists in foxholes, right? Well, there are no atheists when you have a dodgy internet connection and you're trying to give a presentation. I was very, very worried that it was going to like cut out right in the middle. Here in Costa Rica, we have much more reliable internet, thankfully. But yes, I remember doing that presentation 10 years ago. Wow. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, Valley Librarian Greg followed me for. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, so it's like, and here you are, our paths keep crossing year after year.
That's right.
So, without us even knowing each other.
That's right, exactly. Well, that's the beauty of virtual worlds, right?